This is the Mershman Seed Ag Weather Outlook for July 22nd, 2017. I'm John Felt. Well, the unusual temperature and rainfall patterns persist across the Corn Belt from west to east, west being hot and dry, east being unusually wet, and we are beginning to see a significant impact on agriculture due to these anomalies. Now, I'm wondering if we're starting to get some feedback in the far west with that really dry ground, lack of evapotranspiration. So as we get into the scattered precipitation time of the year, afternoon and evening, we might not get that, so drought impacts could increase even further. So taking a look at the upper atmosphere temperature pattern, I think you can very clearly see the story that we've had over recent days. This dome of high pressure, very hot air, not just at the Earth's surface, but well aloft, and that's putting a cap on the atmosphere in many areas. Very hot air. It's centered there over parts of Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, parts of Nebraska, with unusually hot and record-setting temperatures nearing or exceeding 100 degrees in spots. I wanted to show you soil moisture last week. This is where we did not necessarily need any additional rain in the darker shades of green, so parts of Wisconsin, parts of Indiana and Ohio did not necessarily need any more rain, but southeast Iowa, most of Iowa, good parts of Illinois and Missouri, and definitely the western Corn Belt, which is very, very dry, did need that. So where did we get the rain? Well, we got some rain over this region right here. And this was sort of mixed here. Some of this area was already quite wet. It would have been better if it was further to the south here. Would have been very needed further to the south, but some of this area did need additional rain. So if you're in some of this area, you're probably saying that was a good rain. Other people are probably saying, well, the ground was already quite wet and we got more rain on top of that. And that was 5 inches of rain. So we're dealing with a much more complicated type situation this year compared to last year. Not just from several weeks of wet weather over the eastern Corn Belt, but now we're looking at even several day periods of very heavy rain is causing problems. Now look at parts of North and South Dakota. There was some rainfall in that area, 2 inches in spots. Nebraska, very scattered, so Nebraska needs more rain. We did get a few areas of 2 inches of rain, but more areas did not get significant rain. Likewise, over the majority of Iowa, just some light precipitation. So very scattered type pattern with needed rain in spots and a few spots not so much needed rain. And you can see that right here over the last 30 days. Look at these anomalies. These are 4 inches or more, the purple, 4 inches or more than would be normal. And these are areas that are probably struggling to some degree with fields that are really getting quite wet. We saw the flooding up around Chicago, but southern Wisconsin, far northern Illinois, parts of Indiana, and fairly large parts of Ohio have really got some drenching rainfall over the last 30 days. Now look further to the west. All those areas in yellow are deficits over the last 30 days from 1 to as much as 3 inches. So the western Corn Belt, the central Corn Belt needs more rain, but parts of the eastern Corn Belt has been wet. Now temperatures, no doubt about it, have been very hot over the last week. Parts of the Great Lakes, you can see that area in green were below normal. That's due to the clouds and the rain, but everywhere else well above normal. And we're looking at 10 degrees above normal over parts of the upper Midwest and the upper plains. Okay, so let's look at the forecast here. For almost the entire summer now, we've been dominated by this ridge of high pressure. And what is going to dominate our weather, not just this week, but probably for into August, will be where this position sets up. If it's been sort of alternating back and forth from a little bit further to the west. This week it's been a little bit further to the east. And then downstream we get a dip in the jet stream, and that brings some cooler air and also the wetter weather. So if we're under predominantly this ridge of high pressure, we're looking at hot and dry. If we're looking at this area over here, we're looking at cooler and wet. So this week we're going to start out very, very hot, record-setting temperatures, but gradually we're going to be cooling off later in the week. Nothing going on in the tropics. Very quiet. Wanted to show you later in the week, this is midweek, and we have this high pressure pushing in. As that area of high pressure starts to retreat a little bit to the west, it allows a cool front to come down. Look at these are north winds, these barbs, wind barbs here. And we're going to have somewhat cooler air pushing in as we get into the middle and latter part of the week, primarily over the central and eastern Corn Belt. Now, as far as precipitation goes, there is some chance of rain with this front. I think it's going to be scattered. I think it's going to be limited, but there is some modest precipitation. And if it would fall in this part of Iowa and Illinois, that would be a needed rain, as well as Missouri. But it looks like the western Corn Belt, all the way from Kansas northward to the Dakotas, including Nebraska, really not much this week, not nearly as much as is needed. Now, of course, over Ohio, which is already wet, you see that there could be a more significant rain. So this pattern of the eastern Corn Belt being wet, western Corn Belt being dry, that has not been broken, and that looks like that's going to continue this week. Not as strong of a pattern as we've seen in the past, but still, the pattern is still there. Now, the end of July into August 1st, what do we see here? Well, we see that ridge of high pressure has pushed off a little bit further to the west, a dip in the jet stream over the eastern quarter of the U.S., and that's going to bring in some cooler air over the eastern Corn Belt. So anywhere in this area in blue here, unshaded in blue, we're looking at near normal summer temperatures, maybe even a little bit below normal summertime temperatures. And then all the way from Texas right up into the Dakotas, Kansas, Nebraska, North and South Dakota, unfortunately, more unusually hot weather. And this is where I start thinking about feedback. And what I mean by that, the ground is so dry over some of these areas, we just don't have that chance for your daily 30% chance of thunderstorms because that moisture comes from the ground and is evaporated into the atmosphere. Let's look a little bit further out. And this is early August. I don't have the date in there. I do that a lot. I don't notice that date. This is into the first week in August. And look at this flow. This flow is even more amplified. This is a very amplified flow for summertime. Very strong reach of high pressure. Pretty good deep digging of a trough. And look what we get here. Very strong line here. Western, far western Corn Belt, above normal. Central Corn Belt, near normal. Eastern, below normal. So the heat as we get into the early part of August is going to be broken if this works out over most of the Corn Belt, and we're going to have normal or even below normal temperatures. The western, far western Corn Belt could continue to experience above normal. Okay, so week one, precipitation. Primarily the eastern Corn Belt above normal, western Corn Belt below normal precipitation. And week two, really the models are not giving much indication one way or the other, just sort of showing equal chances one way or the other of mainly normal precipitation. So not a real good indication one way or the other for week two. So basically, the summary of today's briefing, we're going to start out unusually hot, but then we're going to usher in a pattern that's going to last through the rest of July into August of cooler weather, or at least normal or seasonal temperatures over the central and eastern Corn Belt. I don't really see much change in the precipitation pattern with modest rainfall over the eastern Corn Belt, and over the west it still looks like, even though there could be some rain from time to time, it still looks like a very dry pattern. So that's this week's briefing. I hope we all survive the very hot weather, 100-degree temperatures in spots, and look forward to some cooler weather as it pushes in to late July into early August. Have a great week.